So let's look at a couple things. One thing that I didn't talk about is it's not really that necessary, but it might be a good idea to have a floor as an extruded element eventually, and the ceiling. In this case, it's really not that necessary because there's typically nothing on the floor unless there's some pattern that's like, or a hole in the floor or a hole in the ceiling. It's typically read as a continuous plane, right? So I assume I'm looking all here. Okay. The other thing is, I'm going to let's look at it sort of the right orientation. The other thing is, what's interesting is, and this is actually a good example, the one mistake a lot of people make is if you're doing something specific, like for a view, right? For an actual view, a lot of people sometimes get caught up in the details and like start modeling things that they'll never ever see. So the technique, we sort of see this here. We almost see like back a house, something's going on over here, but we don't really care because we're never going to look at it from this end. And that's important, especially if we're 3D modeling, especially if we start getting into like rendering, animation. Like, so I remember working on a project and we were brought in on it and they said, yeah, the person's really behind, can you help us catch up? And we opened the model they were working on and it was like they were modeling all the steel that was inside the column that you would never ever see ever because it was wrapped. So you have to be clever. Yeah, but no. The structure might be you might assume what the structure might be just to get a sense, but I think to start adding like insane detailing of like what a column and like details is at the beginning stage is way too early. Unfortunately or fortunately, not really. They're called fabricators, and they do all the drawings. So architects typically don't do shop drawings. So if say we design this building, and we say there's a facade, we might understand what the opening, what the divisions are, and we might put a specification of how it should perform, but you're not going to draw the details. No, you're never going to draw that. Yeah, you're designing the building. So that's like a big misconception of architects sometimes. Like they think we're not drawing nuts and bolts. Can we? Do some people? Sure. If the architecture is about nuts and bolts and like sort of high-tech detailing and, like Richard Rogers or certain architecture it's all about that, yeah, then it's a different story, especially if everything's custom. So yeah, you'll find some extreme, but in the end, it still gets produced by fabricators. So there's CAD people working and making shop drawings that they submit to the architect for review, and either make changes, add comments, and so forth. So we typically produce. I mean, not that. Don't get me wrong. I think in understanding the detailing is really important, especially if it's an assembly. So if it's like a wall assembly, yeah, then it becomes important, because there is no shop drawings. It's being assembled on site, like this layer, then that layer, then this layer, then that layer. But if it's sort of a component that's prefabbed, like prefabricated, like a window that comes to the job site, you just spec out the window. And probably you'll never draw that in your life. But it's good to know how it works, right? So, yeah, you might get a job doing that, but you'll be working for a window manufacturer. You don't want to do it. Yeah, so you want to do the fun, right? You want to do the design. You don't want to work for like Pella drawing window details. All right, so we sort of previewed this a little bit earlier, like setting up the camera. So I'll stumble through it again because they always change. So the new version is sort of of AutoCAD. I don't know when they made the switch, but they've added this sort of little camera. They try to make it seem more like their 3ds Max, I guess. So if we go to cam or camera, we can start setting up a camera. Now, one thing to take care of, you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here that we might not want to see. So my advice is always, and I won't do this for this, but if you're doing this on your own, get used to save as. Like, say maybe this is like save as today's date, which is the 11th, 3/11/2015, version whatever 5, and then as you make changes, it's a good idea to have these files. I mean, don't overdo it, but that way you're working with specific geometry. So if we type in cam for camera, it says specify camera location. So we might have, and sometimes we just set this up and see what we get, and we go from there. So it asks for where you want to like be, and then where you want to look, right? And then we get a couple things. A very important one is the lens. So by default, it's set up to a 50 millimeter. Our eye is, I believe, around 35 millimeter. But typically for these interiors, we can kick them up to a 20 millimeter. Okay, so if you ever use the camera and you're using like a 35 millimeter lens or a 50 millimeter or like an 18 to 80 millimeter lens, this is sort of how you adjust the zooming, right? And that's all based on angle of vision, right? Like how much does the lens see? And we'll talk about perspectives in a minute. So that's set up. So if I hit enter, now obviously this thing, if I double click on this, we're on the floor, because by default it's set to be on the floor. So we're not seeing very much. So we need to figure out a couple things. So we can actually, if we come here and we select our camera, we can move our camera. So this is where we can start to go to a different view. And our camera, if we pick this, and let me change the visualization style to wireframe. Make this smaller again. Oh. And if we do a move command, you can see I'm sort of stuck in the XY, right? So if we do a UCS X90, and flip it up, and this was some people having problems drawing lines, we can start moving the camera up, right? So we can say move from 0,0 to 0,5 foot 6 inches. Let's do that again. Oh, I don't know what that is. Do you constantly get that, or is that my screen? The dialog box popping up. 2.4 feet. Are you in feet and inches?
Don't do the foot. Yeah, no, I just did.
Oh my God! How would you do that? So you're in meters right now.
Yeah.
You're like in units. So now we're like looking up, right? So if we go back to our top view, UCS world, plan, enter, enter. You can see obviously when we have our camera, we're catching that corner. And what we can do is start thinking about, like, widening this, or we can move, moving this forward, or we can start turning stuff off. Like we can take this and either turn it off based on its layer. Is that the layer?
Yeah.
So if we come back here now, we don't see that anymore. So there's tricks on how we can sort of fake what's going on in the room. That way, if we now move this around and we say we just want to catch that corner, so this is what we're seeing in that space. Now we can also, this will adjust like what our view angle is. So if we, just so you know what this does, if I come here and put this there, it's sometimes, in this case, if we set up a clipping plane, it will actually clip it. But we can also not sure why it's not letting me fully move that. We can rotate the camera and look a certain amount. Sorry? Clipping is like we'll actually cut where the field of depth is. But we won't want to do that. And then the sort of view is sort of fixed to a certain size. And we can look at that when we set up our sheet. And it's all based on proportions of our window. So right now we're making our room look really wide because we're getting a lot of wall. You know, so we're picking up a lot of detail. We're actually catching a corner here that's really wide. So this is basically maybe where we want to be as a setup. Okay. Now what we can do is go to our layout, and in this case, let me go ahead and close this.
You can get rid of all the other stuff.
That's okay. I don't want to delete anything on you. And let's look at a couple of things. So I'm going to go ahead and delete. This layout hasn't been set up, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy. Let's go ahead and set up a let's see. So we can set up a viewport. So if we do a single, we can set up the view to camera. So I deleted the old one, went to viewports, single view. We want that to be a camera, and then we want our visual style. We can go to hidden. We're eventually going to change it to the other hidden. And then we hit OK, and then it asks for first corner, second corner. So we'll go a little bit outside. And then I'll make our view on the sheet.
Kind of like when you're plotting, make the phone separate.
Yeah, so like the way we were doing the plotting for the detail when we made made it an isometric in the end. In this case, we're actually using a camera. So the easiest place to do that is, where if we just delete the one we don't want, and we go to viewports, because that's what those are. We say single, camera, and we could say hidden for now. And then make our viewport. Okay. Now we can go back to here, and we can go to properties. Let's go back to, and let's type in properties. So now if I pick this, remember we were using shade plot, we were using legacy hidden. This will work better than hidden, I don't know why. But legacy hidden is the one we want to do under shade plot. So now when we go, so this is 8.5 by 11. We go to File, Print, Plot. This is where we switch this to Adobe PDF. We can just leave layout. Remember, we pop out here. So we still have to deal with our line weights. So this is where you hope you use normal colors like red through magenta. And we say we use black. And then, depending on how you dealt with line weights and perspective work much differently. Because typically, like with a plan or elevation, we're dealing with line weights that are about giving you a sense of depth, right? Where here, the line weights are harder to sort of pull off in a sense of depth because we have lines that are moving from one end to the other, right? Like that corner here is moving inward. So we can't go from a thick to a thin. Like you would never do that if you're hand drawing, right? So the line weights here can be sort of more neutral in the sense of not sort of giving a sense of depth through heaviness, but the image itself gives, the perspectiveness of the image gives that illusion, right? So we might set it to a sort of standard. Let's try 0.25. And then we can preview that. So there it is previewed. Yeah, I just made 0.25 for all. Now it looks like you're using some special grays.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. But say I'm happy with this. So I can hit enter. And then what I can do is plot this. Just store it on your desktop. And now I'll have it as a PDF. So what's great about a PDF? I can open it up in Illustrator. Now, why would I ever want to open it up in Illustrator? Couple reasons. So let's even talk about what Illustrator is. So I'm going to use my screen now. And I can transfer that. Let me pause this real quick. So let's look at Illustrator. So, in my opinion, so do you guys know Adobe? Heard of Adobe? A little bit. Probably watch. Do you guys watch the Super Bowl? They even had a commercial. It's like mainstream now. So they produce a lot of different software specific for sort of the graphic market, right? Sort of Photoshop for photos, Illustrator for illustrations. They have Adobe Premiere, which are for premieres, which are movies, or like doing moving images. They have a lot of software. What else do they have? InDesign for doing designs like publications and large format posters or so forth. Sort of the graphic layout standard, and these are like the standard. This is this is what everybody uses. Photoshop is like used by probably I don't know. I would probably at least say 25% of the population in the U.S. probably has touched Photoshop at some point, especially because they're teaching the software in high school now and Illustrator in high school. So you're getting a lot of this digital manipulation happening at an early age. Illustrator is specifically for illustrations, and why is that interesting? for us because it works the same way AutoCAD works. It's a vector-based software, so it's not like Photoshop. And we can maybe pause and let's go ahead and open up that PDF. And when it opens up, it's, you know, it's sideways. That's the way it just comes out. I'm recording. It's going. I started up again. So we can do a couple things. We can take the entire image and rotate it. We can also, I don't think we can actually rotate, unfortunately, here. But what we could have done is when we had the PDF open, at least I think, sometimes these PDFs don't like to be altered. We can rotate it in this sense. I believe it's counterclockwise. So that's right. Okay. And then let's go ahead and save it. Let's see if that opens it. How we think it should be open. No, didn't make a difference. So we have to manually rotate it. This is top, right? So if I select everything, I can go here at the corner and there's like a little rotation. If I hold down the shift key, like in AutoCAD, it locks it. Now you can see our paper. This is our paper in the background, which is 8.5 by 11. If we click on Document Setup, which is right here, there's an Edit Artboard. That's our artboard. So we can go ahead and change the artboard size by just sort of freeforming it, which is always not a bad idea, especially if you're trying to match a view or give yourself a little more left and right. We can sort of adjust it, and then when we're done, we can just hit escape. So we can set up the view a little bit more custom to what we're working with. So again, document setup, edit artboard. Say I want to have this thing actually there. Hit escape. So whatever's only on the artboard is what's going to ultimately print. Now if you look at this, it takes in the line weights. It looks a little different. We're on a white background. If we zoom in on this, it looks exactly the same as we would if we looked at it in AutoCAD preview. Okay. Completely the same. But you know, we can come in and actually select lines. So these are the individual lines. But we don't manipulate them the way we do in AutoCAD. Where in AutoCAD we're working like in standards of architecture, offset, things that make sense. In here it's more of a sort of free form. It's not like about precision. Okay? So there's no scale here. So this is truly for sort of illustrating the final product. So what we can do is, say we wanted to add tonal value. Okay? Like you want to test how these walls might look in color, we can start adding that. Now can we do that in AutoCAD? Yes. But I think Illustrator, you know, you want to do all your line weights in AutoCAD and get everything coming out good. But I think the sort of final processing, I think, is a little bit more creative in Illustrator as a sort of technique. Even like if we did floor plans and we wanted to color floor plans. I think it's more one-to-one. It's like what you see is what you get. Where in AutoCAD you're working on black, you're seeing a bunch of colors, you know, you're adding hatches. And it's sort of, there's an extra layer of interpretation that you have to deal with, where in Illustrator it's, you know, what you see is what you get, right? Pretty much. So like in AutoCAD, there's also layers. These layers work more like if people worked in Photoshop, where you actually layer things one on top of another. It's more intuitive. So where AutoCAD layers are not about maybe what's on top of each other, it's just like organizing the geometry. And we can also organize geometry. So I can lock the main layer and then go here and make a new layer. And maybe we'll call this tone. And then I'll go ahead and throw the tone underneath my main line drawings. Now when things are coming out of AutoCAD, we sometimes have like background white, which means if I unlock this, if I were to click, sometimes you get some white. I don't have that. It looks like we're all good, but sometimes you have sort of filled black or filled white. It looks like everything is just line geometry, so there's nothing behind it. So I can start drawing. Now say I wanted to paint this a certain color. I can come here now and there's a pen tool. So again, there's not the same tools. This is more of an artistic sort of rendering software, like illustration software. So I can click on pen, and what pen will allow me to do, it will allow me to somewhat snap these anchor points and start to draw, in this case, basically a bounding box where that wall is, and then close it. Now you can see nothing happened. Nothing really happened at all. We've created a shape, but nothing's really there. If I turn this off, there is a shape there. Okay? But it's just lines. By default, if we look here to our left, this is where we control two things. This is the stroke. This is like the actual line, as if we were to stroke a line around the wall. And the other one that right now has a red line going through the box is the fill color. Now, if I switch this to black and white, the line turns black. I can also switch these like this, and they go from a solid tone of black. I can also come to the stroke and say don't stroke anything on here because I have that layer already that has the line geometry. But now I can come here and select this, come to my color picker, and then change the color. And say I want an orange wall there. Okay. Or I can say I want to get a little fancier. I want to have a gradient. And I can make different types of gradients. That's a linear gradient. I can change the gradient colors. It's going to let me change the colors to RGB. That's sort of the start color. So if I wanted it sort of fake, like the projector always looks a little darker, like some type of wall that looks textured. Okay, so we can start producing these sort of illustrated interiors. Just using the pen tool. In this case, let's go ahead and get that wall. Now it's always going to take the last thing we did. So in this case, we can adjust like where that's happening. You know, it starts to produce an effect like it seems like it's a rounded edge, right? Where did my gradient go? So let's put that.
And is it still feasible when you have a bunch of splines and curves everywhere?
Say that again?
Like if you have like curves all over the place, would it be possible to visualize things like?
Yeah, curves. What type of curves would you have all over the place?
Like if you have a rounded wall or if you have like a dome?
Yeah, you can do all. Yeah. So if we want to make curves, what we can do is let's maybe make a new layer. There's a couple. I mean, there's standard sort of geometries. What can be like line curves, spirals, you know, ellipses. But if we go to the pen tool and we click once, but I don't want straight. I click and hold. So we can start producing a shape like that. What's that? Yeah, of course. Yeah. So yeah, we can make strange shapes. And then we can, you know, add stuff to the floor.
Since it uses vectors though, why can't it just do that automatically without doing polyline?
One more time.
Since it's using the vectors, can't it just
Like do a fill.
yeah.
You could. There is like a live trace or live paint, but I think it's always better to control it. So there's what's called a live paint, where you it tries to find what those are. Okay. Does everybody get this so far? So I think we can come in here and you can add. So the idea is like maybe next week I want to take what you guys have for this, like try to produce something like this for today before we leave in 1 hour or less. Like just produce something. I know some of you guys are like, no. Okay, attempt it. I think the only way you succeed and fail. But I want to show you one last thing. Sorry, let me just show you Photoshop. And while that's opening, you guys don't have any fear with this stuff. I mean, I think you just have to try it, and if it's not working, eventually either you'll run out of time and exhaust yourself, which is not maybe a bad thing, but you'll learn something in the process, or B, you'll figure it out. So let's look up let's see. I might be, maybe lounge is not the right. Let's try modern people. Let's get very specific. Fashion. You guys, I assume, know how to search for people. We can search for very specific sizes. If we go to search tools, size, we can say larger than 1024, so we get some high resolution. Let's see who maybe fits our scene. That guy looks. What is he? Oops. Alright, he's got a thing over his face, but that's okay. So I'll do a save as. I thought he was holding like a lollipop or something. So what I can do is open that. So I just saved that. I assume you guys know how to do that from the internet. And I open up the file. So this is Photoshop. If we zoom in, we can start to see the pixels. Okay. This is not a crazy resolution. It's actually pretty low res. What we'll do, not next week, because I won't be here next week. I have a substitute here. But what we'll do the following week is start looking a little like clipping out a person. But I'll do it real quick so you guys have a preview. What's that? Yeah, it's pretty low, yeah. So what we can eventually do is, and in this case I'll use a magnetic one, we can sort of trace, painfully trace around this guy. What's that? Looks like who? Oh, lost it there. Oh, I'm doing this too fast. Plus, doesn't. I hate when you have that. No. All right, I'm going to use a different, much faster technique, which will be good enough. We'll use the polygonal lasso. And this, because the background's so good, we can almost just take the background, but. So before the days where, you wanted to spend money on buying people, like, you can buy libraries that this is all done already. You would do this painfully. Go on Michigan Avenue, start photographing people. And then put them in your scene. That's a nice. This guy's really patterned up. So I'm going super fast. Probably going to go faster. Watch. Okay, so I can take this now, copy them, file new. Okay, edit, paste. So there he is now. So there's him clipped out. Another tool is the magic wand. The magic wand will select areas. See how I just selected all the white? and I'll typically do a pretty good job of selecting the areas and clipping it out. So then I can do a file, save as. I'll just throw this on the desktop. Let's call this person. Hit OK. Go back to Illustrator. I can go File, Place. And again, we'll go over this when you guys have actually scenes that are worthy. Place them in here. And then I can actually take them and scale them up. And then we'll put them on a layer. Let me cut them. We'll put them on a new layer. That's on top. And then paste, so he's on top of the lines. And now you have your guy in your room.
It's too big.
It's probably too big. Your room is really tall, right?
Yeah,
It's like the giant. We try to get him to a scale. So, I mean, the powerful thing about AutoCAD is, believe it or not, and maybe you guys don't even realize this, a lot of like the hand-rendered stuff that's done, it's all modeled quickly the way we've done that in AutoCAD, flipping up things, getting a quick perspective. Now just imagine we print this and then hand trace over this like with vellum. I mean, just imagine you had a real complex building. So a lot of the real complex renderings you might see that are hand-rendered are all done first digitally, because it takes too much time to do a true 2-point perspective. Unfortunately, with Adobe, they have a good deal. They have a 30-day trial. We won't be doing much of this, but I just want to, give you guys a sort of overview. So I can let's see if the guy comes into File, Export, and I'm gonna export it as a DWG. Let's see if they have 2012. So then I can go into AutoCAD.
So those are the layers in this program are more like a classical sense of layer, like layered on top of each other. It's not like AutoCAD where it's kind of like separate.
You got to still move things around. Yeah, AutoCAD is more about organization versus like how it's being viewed. So now I can go open a file. And there it is. So it's having some problems.
And what would you import it back for?
Because we have it in 2D. So you don't want to work in Illustrator. Although we can make 2D, but this is 2D now. These are just 2D. So we can do hatches. As long as it's closed. Oh, it's not closed. Or we can draw over lines. So it's more for like to produce the same type of illustrations that we're trying to do. I mean, you can still do like gradients and stuff in here, but like start toning it with hatches. Again, it's not what you see is what you get, right? Illustrator's a little nicer because what you see is what you get, in the sense of working at this level. Okay. Okay, let's stop there. What we're gonna do